Hello friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. So today we will discuss about a new concept of economics, that is elasticity of demand. In the last class, we are discussing about the law of demand. Now we will discuss about elasticity of demand. So first we will see that what is elasticity of demand and how elasticity of demand is different from law of demand. What is the importance of elasticity of demand? Then we'll discuss about the types of elasticity of demand. Okay, so let's begin. So elasticity of demand is nothing but the degree of responsiveness in quantity demanded due to the change in its determinants. So what are the determinants? Price of the concerned commodity, prices of related goods, and income of the consumer. So once again we can say that elasticity of demand is nothing but the degree of responsiveness in quantity demanded of a commodity due to the change in its determinant. So there are three types of elasticity of demand: price elastic demand, cross elastic demand, and income elastic demand. But price elastic demand is popularly known as elastic demand or elasticity of demand. When we will discuss about elasticity of demand, that means we should understand that we are talking about price elastic demand, not the cross elastic demand, not the income elastic demand. So the price elastic demand is popularly known as elasticity of demand. Now the question is, what is price elastic demand? Price elastic demand is the degree of responsiveness in quantity demanded of a commodity due to the change in its own price, its constant price. Once again, the degree of responsiveness in quantity demanded of a commodity due to the change in its own price is called price elastic demand. Now we will see that what is the formula of price elastic demand. The price elastic demand is defined as the proportionate change in quantity demanded to the proportionate change in price. Or we can say price elasticity of demand is equal to change in quantity demanded due to the change in price. The proportionate change in quantity demanded to the proportionate change in price. Or we can say this is P del Q by Q del P. P del Q, price into change in quantity, divided by quantity into change in price. Okay, now you see that what is the importance of elasticity of demand, why we are studying elasticity of demand, and how it is different from law of demand. My dear students, you just remember that elasticity of demand talks about the proportionate change in quantity demanded due to the proportionate change in price. But law of demand only talks about the inverse relationship between price of a commodity and its quantity demanded. But it doesn't talk that due to a proportionate change in price, the quantity demanded changes by how many percentage. But that can be calculated by using elasticity of demand. Now we will see that what are the types of elasticity of demand. The price elastic demand is broadly categorized into 5 categories. The first one is perfectly elastic demand. The second one is perfectly inelastic demand. Then relatively elastic demand, or we can say relatively more elastic demand. Then relatively inelastic demand, or we can say relatively less elastic demand. And number 5, unitary elastic demand. So now we will discuss about all these type of elasticity of demand one by one in detail. Okay, so first we will discuss about perfectly elastic demand. So what is perfectly elastic demand? If a proportionate change in price leads an infinite change in quantity demanded, then we can say this is perfectly elastic demand. That means if there is a small change in price leads an infinite change in quantity demanded, then we can say that this is perfectly elastic demand. For example, if the price will increase somehow, a small amount, then the quantity demanded will decline infinitely to 0. And if the price will decline somehow, then the quantity demanded will increase infinitely. So in this case, the demand curve is a horizontal straight line. And here, the coefficient of price elasticity demand is infinite. So the elasticity of demand here is infinite. Now we'll see the second type of elasticity of demand, that is perfectly inelastic demand. Perfectly inelastic demand. So what is perfectly inelastic demand? If quantity demanded doesn't respond to the change in price, or we can say there is no change in the quantity demanded due to any change in price, then we can say this is perfectly inelastic demand. So in this diagram, the demand curve is a vertical straight line. It's a vertical straight line. And this vertical straight line demand curve represents that whatever the price, suppose we can say here that if the price is suppose P2, at that time the quantity demanded is Q1. If price will increase due to the increase in due to the decline in supply, if the price will increase, then quantity demanded remain constant. Similarly, if due to the increase in supply, the price will decline, still the quantity demanded remain constant. So, in a nutshell, we can say that the quantity demanded doesn't change to any change in price. The quantity demanded doesn't respond to any change in price in case of perfectly inelastic demand. So, in this case, the coefficient of price elasticity of demand is 0. So, the best example of perfectly inelastic demand is the use of medicine, the use of salt, because if the price of salt will increase, people will never reduce its consumption. Similarly, if the price of salt will decline, people will never increase the consumption of salt. Similarly, in case of medicine also, whatever the change in price of medicine, the change in demand of medicine will remain constant. So this is the best example of perfectly inelastic demand. Now we will see elastic demand or relatively more elastic demand. We can say this is relatively more elastic demand or elastic demand. So what is relatively more elastic demand? If a proportionate change in price leads more than proportionate change in quantity demanded, then we can say this is relatively more elastic demand or elastic demand. Once again, in other words, we can say that if a small change in price leads a large change in quantity demanded, then we can say that this is relatively more elastic demand, and in this case elasticity of demand is greater than 1, and here the demand curve is flatter. The shape of the demand curve is downward sloping, but it is flatter. But in case of inelastic demand or relatively less elastic demand, the demand curve is steeper. The demand curve here also downward sloping, but it is steeper in comparison to the demand curve of relatively more elastic demand. Now we want to know that what is inelastic demand. If a proportionate change in price leads less than proportionate change in quantity demanded, then we can say that this is inelastic demand or relatively less elastic demand. If a large change in price leads a small change in quantity demanded, then we can say this is inelastic demand or relatively less elastic demand. And in this case, the coefficient of price elasticity is less than 0. Now we will see the unitary elastic demand. So unitary elastic demand is if a proportionate change in price leads equiproportionate change in quantity demanded, then we can say this is unitary elastic demand. That means if price change by 10% and quantity demanded change by 10%, then here the change in price and the change in quantity demanded is same. So we can say this unitary elastic demand, and in this case the coefficient of elasticity of demand is equal to 1, is exactly 1. So this is all about our types of price elastic demand or types of elasticity of demand. Hope you enjoyed my video. If you really like my video, then do like, share and subscribe. Thank you. Thank you so much.